Okay. So in this second part then of our study into the African traditional religion, what I want us to do is to look at those traits, all right, those traits which are true and peculiar then to what we are calling ATR, African Traditional Religion. Are you ready? Okay. Now, we've already made the point that African traditional religion is based partly on a quasi-biblical worldview, right? But in the second place, we say that quasi-biblical worldview draws from the reality of general or natural revelation. Is that right? That's what explains it. But we went to the third place and made the comment that even though then there is a semblance of God, an awareness of God in that system, which comes from natural revelation, that is only sufficient to condemn, but not sufficient to save. And so really, the African traditional religion knows something about God, but doesn't know God truly. Not in a saving way. Those are the three big points we've made in the previous lecture. And therefore then, we have, probably if you want to put a fourth point to the previous lecture, we have then said we have to be careful then as we deal with African traditional religion. We sometimes get to be too soft with it when we need to be very hard with it. Isn't it? We sometimes treat it as an innocent kind of religious expression, yet it is not innocent, not at all. The first thing you will find in African traditional religion is the idea of a higher power. The idea or notion of a higher power. You will find that in the African traditional religion. The idea of a higher power. In other words, we are saying African traditional religion is not atheistic. You understand atheism? Atheism? You understand that? No God, right? It's only us. That is not true of the African traditional religion and African traditional culture. We have always had the idea of a higher power. There is something or someone who is above us. As a matter of fact, in many cultures, African cultures, they attribute creation and existence of reality to that higher power. Now that is definitely biblical, isn't it? Because the Bible talks about this higher power who created the heavens and the earth and everything there is in them. Genesis 1 and verse 1. Psalms chapter 24 and verse 1. The earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. All right. There was always that. Even before the Bible. Before the coming of the missionaries. Before the advent of Christianity, there was this idea of a higher power. This power that is, now, in terms of the African cultural, religious, even philosophical expression, this higher power is a powerful, even omnipotent power. African traditional culture, African traditional religion assumes that. He is omnipotent. He is powerful. He can do things because he's the one who has created things. There is that awareness in the African traditional mindset, in the African traditional religion, in the African philosophical mindset. There is this higher power who is omnipotent, omnipresent. This being is able to control, let me not even say that first, is not only all-powerful, but is also a moral being. All right? You find that in the African culture. Moral being, a moral power. This higher power is also moral. What does moral mean? Upright, yeah, of course, it means that. Immoral, not upright, all right? Morality has to do with right and wrong, right and wrong. So the African culture, the African philosophy, the African religion has the idea of a higher power who is also a moral power. In other words, he is a power or a being who insists on right and wrong. Surely, which African culture had an idea that killing people is okay? That if you woke up one morning and you don't like Wycliffe, you just kill him? None. Isn't it? None. Well, there was killing, obviously, but they were reasoned out. They were given rationale. But killing was wrong. That's an expression of morality, isn't it? Has adultery been ever right in any African culture? No. Of course, when they are redefined and renamed, for example, as wife inheritance, they begin to make sense, isn't it? But adultery is adultery in most African culture. In other words, there is morality. There's the idea of right and wrong within the African culture, African philosophy, African religion. Are these biblical concepts? Of course, the Ten Commandments. That's what we mean by quasi-biblical, isn't it? They recognize there is a higher power. We, Christians, recognize that. The Bible recognizes that. They recognize morality, the idea of right and wrong. We also do that. Of course, it's corrupted, but it is there. In fact, the idea of morality within the African culture is funny as you look at it, because it is not just that the Ten Commandments are there to be obeyed without question, but that they can in fact be modified. You take the wife of your brother. It's adultery, because you married yourself. It's adultery. She is somebody else's wife who's now dead. We could say now she's free, but you're married and you're told to inherit this woman. It's a horrible thing. It's adultery, but it's been redefined, you see, within the cultural setting. It no longer sounds and looks bad, but it's the same adultery. I'm trying to think of a time, I think this was the year 2000 or 2001, but I think it's the year 2000. I was in Loitoktok. This is Kajiado County. Elastic border. That's the border between Kenya and Tanzania, the other side. And this is the Maasai land, and I was preaching there. And one time we are passing through, and maybe I've told this story before. I'm passing through a home, and what should I see in front of the door? There is a spear, grounded on the ground, and on that spear there is a pair of shoes. Actually, one part of a shoe, a color shoes, right? Is there. And I said, why? Has that been put there to dry or what? Did they wash it? Because I can see. Ma'am, will you excuse me? I'm in class. I'll call you when I'm done. I'm so sorry.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So the idea, I was confused. So I said, what's that? And the people said, let's just pass. They are very quick. They said, let's just pass. Let's just pass. And I said, no, you've got to tell me. I'm a new visitor. What is this? And they said, what is happening in that house now is terrible. There is a man who is not the husband of that woman who is sleeping in that house as we speak. I said, how is that? What if the husband comes? And they told me, if the husband comes and finds that spear like that with a shoe on it, the husband, as we say in Swahili, atajipea shughuli. All right? And then come later, when he doesn't see that spear, you know that guy has. Isn't that fornication, adultery? But culturally, it's accepted. If we are circumcised at the same time, your wife is really my wife is really your wife. Let us just respect each other and not do it when you're present. And if I want to be protected, let me make a signal out there so you don't come in. It's a horrible thing, isn't it? So you find that then there is the idea of right and wrong morality, but it's been redefined. That is what Paul is calling suppressing the truth in unrighteousness in verse 18 of chapter 1. Now, among the Luos, there was a funny thing. The Luos were, I think the Luos as well as they have several tribes in Kenya, I think, but I know among the Luos, when they used to make their houses, if I was going to build my house, okay, I had to build it in such a manner that there was some room which had a way of escaping. We call it rot, all right, rot. That's you create a hole in the wall which is always covered, but somebody can escape through it. And that hole is, for example, if I'm married to a lady, and this lady, for example, is barren, or not the lady, me myself, I can't give seed which can produce a baby. Well, I want children, don't I? But I don't want to know where those children come from. So what happens is, the lady, being wise to protect my man ego, all right? Because men never want to share, obviously. So we have to be protected. You know, we have this elephant ego. We will kill somebody. So what is happening is, the lady, being wise, will cultivate a friendship with another man outside. Bring that man in the house, because if the pregnancy was conceived in my house, that is technically my child. But that other route of escape was in case I come and they were not aware, then the man must escape through the other house. So it is a structure that is being put there culturally. But you see, then the escape means they know it is wrong. Paul calls it suppressing the truth in unrighteousness. You see what I'm saying? But the fact is, by dint of general revelation, there is an awareness of right and wrong. But the third thing then that you would find in African traditional religion is the idea of consequence. Consequence. That the wrong things we do have a consequence. Isn't it? Remember, we say higher power, all right? And then what do we say next? The idea of right and wrong. But once you have an idea of right and wrong, you surely must conceptualize that right and wrong implies that wrong will be punished. that we are accountable to something other than ourselves, to a higher power. You find that mindset within African traditional religion. You find it there. Now here's a problem sometimes that occurs. Within the African traditional religion, the accountability is not really the lake of fire. That's not the punishment. It is cause and effect. Write that down. Cause and effect. That the things we do have effects. That the things we do have effect. In other words, if, for example, I do something wrong, there will either be blessing or there will be curse. Now, how we call blessing and curse in different African cultures differs, varies. The Luos will talk of Chira, right? The Luyas will talk of Misiro. Yes. And so on and so forth. Ishira. And Misiro as well, isn't it? It's part of? Correct. It's a sickness that comes out of it, isn't it? But that's a consequence, you understand? We know that the things we do will have a consequence. But again, we are not thinking that that higher power has in fact a day of reckoning. So we are thinking in terms of curse and blessing. Now, I'm arguing in my book, The African Falling Away, that is the thing that the prosperity gospel tapped into in Africa. This idea of curses and blessings. You need somebody to remove the curses. You need to do some things to gain the blessings. So those are three things, isn't it? One, higher power. Two, right and wrong morality. Three, consequences, isn't it? But now I want us to consider something that is fundamental, absolutely basic to understanding African traditional religions and pretty much African culture at large. And here's the point. The multi-layered realities. 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 What am I saying here? Did we discuss something called dualism? What did you say dualism is? Dualism. What did you say it is? Come on now. Yes? Two. So, dualism as a concept, what does it mean?
A mixture of...
Not a mixture, no. It's not a mixture. That's syncretism. Sorry. That is syncretism. That's syncretism, not dualism. Dualism as a concept in biblical studies, and in fact most other studies, is this idea that reality exists in two different realms. There's two different realities. There is the physical reality, then there is the spiritual reality. Dualistic, right? There is the lower reality, then there is the higher. That's dualism. In the words of a German philosopher, Immanuel Kant, he talked of the phenomena versus the noumena. Are you there? What's a phenomena? A phenomena refers to something in what we sometimes call the empirical realm. Empirical realm. Again, I'm going to define that because those are all difficult phrases. Phenomena, empirical, the natural realm. All right? That which we can touch, we can see, we can hear, we can smell. The five senses through which we relate to reality. The sense of touch, sense of hearing, sense of sight, sense of smell, and sense of taste. Those are the five senses through which we relate to reality, isn't it? We consume information and relate to reality through those five senses. How do I know red is red? Because I've seen it. How do I know that is a rose flower and that is onions being fried? I've smelled it, isn't it? How do I know this is rough and this is smooth? Because I've touched it. That's how I relate to and interpret reality. All that is within the realm of nature, we call it the realm of the phenomena, the physical. Are we together? Then there is what Immanuel Kant called the noumenal realm, not phenomenal, but the noumenal. Means the realm we cannot touch, we cannot see, we cannot hear, we cannot smell, we cannot taste. In other words, it is that realm which is inaccessible to the five senses we use to relate to reality. Are you with me now? Where would you put God in those two realms? The noumenal realm. Where would you put yourself? Phenomenal realm, isn't it? Where would you put angels? The noumenal realm. Demons, noumenal realm. So that's the dualism we're talking about. Now, that to an extent is biblical, isn't it? To an extent, and I'm careful with those words, to an extent is biblical. Now, the African traditional religion has a dualistic view of reality. In other words, we in Africa understand that there is the reality we interact with and there is the reality that is above us. Now, by the way, the opposite of dualism is monism. Monism. For example, science is monistic. Mono means one, isn't it? Mono. So we say monism, one. Duo means two. Dualism, two. Are you still following? I know it's just getting just a little technical here. Stay with me. So in the African traditional religion, you have a dualistic view of life. There is the higher and there is the lower. There is the material, there is the immaterial. There is the tangible, there is the intangible. There is the concrete, there is the inconcrete. There is the spiritual, and then there is the physical, natural. Now here's the tricky part with the African traditional religion. They say, how then? Now watch carefully because this is key to the worship of African traditional religion. This is key. How then does Jemima, who is a physical creature, flesh and blood, limited geographically and spatially? You cannot be everywhere at the same time, can you? You are at one point at one time because you're limited. You're a physical creature. How does Jemima connect with the higher power, remember, who lives in the noumenal, the spiritual, the higher, the intangible, the inconcrete realm? How does that happen? What is the connection? What is the bridge? And the African traditional religion then creates a third level that is between the lower and the higher. It is called the intermediate level. Between the lower and the higher, there is the intermediate level. Now watch carefully. Listen carefully. What is true about the intermediate level? What is true about the intermediate level? Remember, the reason why I cannot access the higher level is because I am physical and I'm limited. I am a creature of time and space. The intermediate level is therefore composed, all right, of entities which have both experienced the lower as well as the higher. They are entities which have the physical, they have tested the physical, but have also tested the spiritual. Who are these entities? Three of them. Actually, in the African traditional religion, let's not talk about three. That is when it gets to be Christianized, yes? But in the African traditional religion, that entity is what they are calling ancestral spirits. Ancestral spirits, or spirits of the dead. Ancestral spirits or spirits of the dead. Ancestral spirits or spirits of the dead. In Africa, and let me talk of the Kenyan context, and particularly Western Kenya, and more particularly Nyanza, part of Western Kenya, from where I come. They have a saying there, Yomotho Neno. Yomotho Neno, which translates to the dead see. The dead see. They are still with us. In this intermediate space, we cannot see them sometimes unless they choose to reveal themselves, but they exist. I've told you time and again, haven't I? Among the Luos, if a big snake appears within the compound, that snake is not to be killed. A chicken ought to be prepared and given to the snake. Because apparently they believe that what has happened at that time is maybe the dead father or grandfather of the home has come back to sort of inspect his home, to look at his home, and to ensure everything is correct. So it is not to be killed, it is to be served well. You see, the problem is, once you begin to treat a creature nicely, it hangs around. When it hangs around, they say, look, it's not going away. It is home, it is comfortable in its home. And it stays. That's how Omieri was able to stay among the Luos for a long time. Because they were feeding it chicken. It doesn't have to hunt. Poor people. You lawyers have something that you do. When somebody is knocked down by a car in the road, what do they do? Tell me. They relate to that person. An accident happens, knocked down, the person dies there. They take the body to the mortuary. Do they leave it there? The relatives come to perform a ceremony. In fact, the other day, I live not far from the road. And so there was an accident there, and I went and I saw some things. Then I said, this ceremony happened here. They came to collect the spirit of the dead, to bring it back home. Because even though the person is dead, in the mortuary or sometimes even buried, but they believe its spirit is still hovering around because they believe there is this intermediate space here. These people understand us because they were part of us, isn't it? But they also understand the other realm because they are now part of the other. So they can act as mediators, intermediaries between the lower and the higher realm. What are these things they call Misambwa? What are they? Anybody knows here? Could you tell me what they are? What are Misambwa? Come on, you're Luyas. Tell me. Jemima is happy to contribute here. Do you have some? I'm joking. Yes. Sure.
There were no places to treat people.
Okay.
But there was a home where you go and they profess your disease.
Uh-huh.
And they told you medicine to use.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Uh-huh.
He was the grandfather of the family.
Mm.
And he was known for that in the whole of blood.
Okay.
So they have things like words.
Gods, yeah?
Words.
Gods, yeah, gods. I didn't say gods, I say gods. Of Muka. Okay.
So
all right.
Those things that need to stay there.
The Misambwas.
They stay in those.
Uh-huh.
In those companies.
Yes.
Then when you come, they are brought. There's something spread. They believe those things. They attract them to come.
Yes.
So they spread something down. They bring those words there.
Mm.
This person starts making some noises and then it goes down and says words. Says there's so much down, so and so. Then there's things will speak from inside the words.
From inside the gods, these things will speak.
The voice will come.
The voice will come.
Yes.
Okay.
Saying what he did.
This is Africa, man. I tell you. Here is stuff. Yeah.
Because you don't see them, you only hear them because you think it. Because they say, oh, if it is so and so, this and this happening, and this happening, you are supposed to do like this, and you're supposed to do like this. Maybe
sacrifices. Okay. Mm-hmm. Sure. Mm. Mm. Okay. So the question I was asking you, Jemima. Okay, that's good. But who are they? You've explained what they do, but who are they, Silas? Yes. Who are they?
These were the spirits of the dead.
Thank you.
That were brought together
Mm-hmm.
by a magician or specialized.
Thank you for saying that. That's very important. So really they are spirits of the dead who are being summoned, isn't it? They are being summoned to come and divine a situation, even point to some medicine, isn't it? But do you notice, Silas, that you've just introduced another realm, another thing that you have in the African traditional religion, which is fun, that there has to be a specialist that is able to relate with this third realm. So there's a higher power that controls our destinies, that is responsible for curses and blessings, isn't it? Then there's us here below, but how do we communicate with them? Through the medium of these, spirits of the dead, ancestral spirits. But then you're introducing something which is so true, I was going to come to it, that there has to be this other category of people who are amongst us, but have this special knowledge, this special access, this special power. And they are able to summon those spirits of ancestors, channel the spirits. What do you call them in your culture here? What do you call them? No, do you call them priests in your culture? No, you don't. I think they're basically witch doctors, medicine men. Huh? How about you see? No. The gentlemen are saying no. I'm learning as well. As you say these things, I'm also learning.
I'm also surprised to hear
No, but those things are spirits. You know, that's why they're able to talk.
Yes, what that, I knew they are spirits, but not from the dead, but spirits from the air.
Yeah, but then they are because they're from the dead. That's exactly it. On that one, I'm sure because I've researched it. Spirits of Misambwa are spirits of dead people. Yeah. So that, but they exist in that other, like you say, in the air, that intermediate place. Yeah, go ahead.
Me and Sofa witnesses,
Mm-hmm.
they don't live in those parts.
Mm-hmm.
But there's sound and
To come.
come.
That is what Sinyengo are for, isn't it?
Manyanga.
There's sound to come.
When you do that, and they are, yeah, I think they're being summoned. There was a time I used to have a person, long time ago, used to come to this church. And apparently she was under the influence of Misambwa. And when I talked to her, the way she received them was her grandmother, before the grandmother died. The grandmother sat naked behind her. She was also naked. And then embraced her from behind. And the grandmother began to summon those things, calling them by names. And they would come, and she says she could hear them as they come in, and they are talking as they come. And when the number of them were complete, the grandmother said, I'm no longer your owner. I'm transferring you to this girl. You must listen to her. Well, the lady became a Christian, or thought she became a Christian, but she was still dealing with that kind of thing in her life. And so we had a lot of counseling and prayer to do there. So they are transferable. This is a realm we can't understand fully, can we? Because we are not a specialist, remember? Okay. It's an interesting conversation, actually. And I usually learn a lot when I hear you talk back like this. Okay, no problem. You can talk with him privately. It's fine. You have that private conversation, that's all right. So then, but the point is, whether Misambwas, whatever, I mean, the point is there is this middle place, and there are spirits of the dead who can still talk to us, isn't it? Don't people say, by the way, my mother is so big on this. My mother claims she's a Christian, and we just can't get her to see this. In fact, she's a pastor of some Pentecostal church. And I keep saying, Mama, please, you cannot believe this. My mother still believes my father comes to her. Yeah. He says, hey, your father came. He came and he's very happy. Your father is very happy about you. And she says those kind of things, you know. I'm saying, Mom, he's dead. He is dead. The man is not alive now. And then my brother died the other day, isn't it? Oh, my mother still believes that boy is still coming. And she struggles with that kind of stuff. You know. Because but you see the way she's a Christian, even a pastor, but you can see how traditional African religion still influences her. That's what I'm talking about. So now, as you begin to think that way, here's the other place I want to talk about. These special men and women who are able to somehow tangle and interact with the spirit realm. We honor them, don't we? For the reason that they're able to see into our future, to see into our lives, to divine our problems, and sometimes to even prescribe a solution. And so we honor them. In African culture, the medicine man is a very highly respected individual. Of course, now that the world is civilizing, they are being looked at as rather queer people, isn't it? But in some places, the Sangomas in South Africa, the Wagangas in Kenya. Tell me, do we have other Christian denominations that actually deal like the Sangomas and the medicine men? I think here we call them Vasai. Yes, no? Yes. people who somehow have the ability, by some, I think you guys have something here, a church near here, which is very strange. It's a very strange church. Very strange. I'm told people take the pictures of their husband and wives there, pictures of their children there, and you're supposed to be praying for it and whatnot. I actually had cases here where a husband accused a wife of taking pictures there, you know, and they would do all these things. It's very strange things happening there. Very strange. Very strange happening there. But you see then, is African traditional religion in the guise of Christianity. And people say, where's your church? My church is there. I think it's called Safina. Safina. Well, it's not a church. It's a traditional setup which uses a Bible and the name of Christ. That is why Jesus said in Matthew 7, not everyone who says, Lord, Lord. I mean, it's not enough to say Lord. These traditional medicine men in the African context, these sangomas in the African context, South Africa this is, this Vasai even, the specialists in short, the ones who are able to connect the physical to the spiritual. What can we call them in a biblical word? What function are they doing if they are connecting the physical and the spiritual, the lower and the higher? What's the biblical term for that? Come on now. Come on now. Mediators. Is that true? So really, the African traditional religion understands, this is the next point then, understands the need for mediation. The need for mediation and therefore mediators. The need for mediation and therefore mediators. Again, in this you have to understand, you have to think that in African traditional religion, they recognize that God is transcendent, isn't it? That God is higher, that God cannot be approached by us directly. We can't. There has to be an intermediary here, but that intermediary must be controlled, must be channeled, must be orchestrated, must be moderated, must be mediated through some special men and women who are called mediators. Whether you call them waganga, medicine men, sangomas, whatever you call them, Basai, they are the mediators. So whereas it is true that we need mediators, 1 Timothy chapter 2 and verse 5 has told us there is no mediator, there is no other mediator between God and man except who? The man Jesus Christ. He's the only bridge. He's the only bridge. So scripture tells us. Acts of the Apostles chapter 4 verse 12. Acts of the Apostles chapter 4 verse 12. For there is no salvation in any other, for there is no other name given to us in heaven and on earth by which we must be saved except the name of Jesus. So again, you see that in the African traditional religion, general revelation gives us the idea of God, isn't it? We know our need. We are sinners. We need a salvation. We need a mediation. But we're not seeking after the mediation which God has given, isn't it? We are seeking another one. For they worshipped the creature rather than the Creator, who is blessed forevermore. So the transcendence of the higher power, the need for mediation, blessing and cast motifs, We've talked about that. But there's something else then that is interesting, and this perhaps is the last one that we are dealing with now. Possibility and need for atonement. Possibility and need for atonement in African traditional religion. Possibility and need for atonement. 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 They realize we are sinners, isn't it? We are unable to get to the higher power. Yes. Yeah. You know I'm not an expert in Misambo, right? But go ahead, ask the question. There are people here that might help us. You see, that's what we're trying to say. We're saying African traditional religion is a pseudo-biblical worldview. It is corrupting the knowledge of the Bible because it has something of general revelation. So they know there is something higher there. We would say that's Jehovah God, isn't it? Do they have that clear knowledge? No. But they know there's something higher, isn't it? Do they know that things that happen to us, bad things as a result of a curse, do they know that? Yes. Good things that happen to us are the good things we do. They know that. We're saying Misambwa is the bridge then, that intermediary. Alongside other things, some people not call them Misambwa. The Luos will have Nyawawa, for example. Alright? And then so on and so forth. Every other culture will have their own version of the world of the spirit, the dead. The living dead is what we call them sometimes. The living dead is an oxymoron. It's a paradox. The dead are still alive. The living dead is what we say. Ancestral spirits. Well, to be quite honest, even within Pentecostal, charismatic word faith theology, you have a lot of that mindset. Scripture tells us that the dead are actually dead and they're with God, isn't it? When people die, they either go to paradise or they go to hell. Luke chapter 16. They don't hang around here. But haven't you heard James Mainangana, for example? These are the many preachers, many of them, let's just not single him out. Many of them who say, it's the spirit of your dead aunt. Is that an African worldview? How can he say that when scripture says that the dead actually are in the hands of God? Either in hell or in paradise. They are not hanging here. And that's why I tell my mama every day, my father is either in hell or in heaven, because there was a ambiguity there, okay? He seemed to be repenting at the end of his life, and he had been a preacher for a long time. But then again, there's some things which we think about and thinking, maybe not. So I don't know, all right? I don't know. But I know he's in one of two places. One of the reasons I wept about my brother was I know my brother was not a believer in Christ. That made me cry endlessly. Because I'd lost him here and I've lost him permanently. Unless by God's mercy something happened when he was dying. But when the bullets were going into him, it was because he was in crime. You understand? And so, I'm not saying my brother is somewhere here waiting for something. No. He's either in hell or in heaven. So this idea of, the spirit of your aunt, Rosa Waliokufa, that kind of nonsense is African traditional religion making it, and that's what my book is dealing with, the African falling away. That we have taken some African concepts, cultural concepts, and we've baptized them in the name of Christianity, and we're preaching them as solid truths. Demon spirits are fallen angels. They are not human spirits hanging in the air. They are not. Anyway, That's a different matter altogether. So that's what we are saying there, Penina. We are not saying that they are worshiping God. We are saying there's a deception here. There's a deception here. And according to scripture, that is actually idolatry. That is idolatry. It's the worship of idols, not the worship of the living God. And that is how we must judge African traditional religion, as a worship of idols. And I think that was a mistake the missionaries made when they came, because they didn't see it like that. They thought, these people have an awareness of God. You know. So how atonement in the African traditional religion? Now, you said something, Jemima, when you come to this Misambwa specialist, and they have summoned the Misambwas, this living dead, right? You've told us something back there, that usually they will ask you to bring something. A goat, a chicken, a cow. What will they do with it? For cleansing. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that an interesting word? That they use it for cleansing. By doing what? Sacrificing it. The need and possibility of atonement by way of blood sacrifice. To bring about a cleansing. A cleansing means there is dirt, isn't it? You see how natural revelation works. Romans chapter 2 verse 14 and 15. The Gentiles, without the law of God, know that there is something wrong and there is something right, because the law of God is written in their hearts. Their conscience is condemning them or excusing them. And so every human being inherently within them, by reason of natural revelation, in the language of Romans chapter 2 verse 14 and 15, we know we are sinners, we know we need cleansing, we know we do things wrong. But there is a possibility, a need for atonement. But in the African traditional religion, the atonement isn't by the blood of Christ. It is by the blood of goats and chicken and bulls and so on and so forth, in the words of our sister here, to bring about a cleansing. And when the cleansing comes, the curse is removed. The misfortune is removed. Again, who is the head? Who is the one mediating this process of offering the sacrifice? The medicine men, the witch doctors, the sangomas. Sometimes it's the family heads, isn't it? The head of the clan is the one then that does this. You know, there was that college in Council of Elders who met the other day, and they offered sacrifices to destroy Corona in Kenya. It was on TV. Well, we still have Corona, so it's crazy the things that these people do. So, are we understanding this now? So that's why we're saying it's a quasi-biblical worldview. And that is where it's hiding. So a lot of Christianity has been mixed up with African traditional religion. The whole matter of reburial. Why do people go to reburial? By the way, can you tell me that? Because I know many churches in Kenya, in Western Kenya particularly, who actually go for reburial. Can you tell me what is reburial for? Why do people go for reburial? Come on, you people have lived in the cultural setting, you know what we're talking about. No, just talk to me from an African perspective before you talk about the Anglican Church.
The spirit of the dead person is joined with the other spirits.
We are now releasing them to finally go. Is that true?
Yes.
I think that is true. To make them happy. That is why they have to sacrifice something.
Sometimes others break news of what they want them to be done for.
brought a dream, he wants this and this and that.
So you think because alikuja kusema.
You know, I was hearing something that kind of shocked me, and usually when I sit with the elderly people, this is the kind of conversation I have with them, all right? And so among these Luo elders, they told me, listen, one of them was saying, you know, it was a story being told. Somebody that had died and his grave had not been cemented. The grave hadn't been cemented. It was just, you know, dirt on it. And he says, you know, my brother came. They don't even say in a dream. They simply say, my brother came. You know, they don't even bother telling you in a dream. You are to understand they are very much with us, okay? So, my brother came, and my brother was complaining that we have left him miserable. That storms are oppressing him. He has no house. And his fellow his peers, the age mates, are ridiculing him. They're saying he has no house. Yeah, it's being rained on. There's no house. They can't come visit him. He says, I go visit all my friends, but they can't come visit me because I have no house. You see that kind of language? These are dead speaking to the dead. So if you cement the grave, then you've given him a house, he can invite his friends to come. And I was thinking, oh dear, this is horrible. But they actually believe it. And because of that, the children will be told to contribute. Hey, this thing is serious now. Or else we'll have a misfortune, a misery will come. So in doing that, then we are appeasing them, aren't we? So there's a sense in which when we come to the reburial, we are making happy. Appeasing is the word. Thank you for the word appeasing. Appeasing is the word. We are appeasing the dead, but we are also somehow releasing them to fully participate in the realm that is next, isn't it? There was a time I was attending a funeral, a reburial sort of, that was being moderated on by the Apostolic Church. Long time ago, long time ago. I was shocked what they did. When I came, the grave site was covered by you know, papyrus mikeka. You know, those kind of coverings. And covered, and then the grave itself, there was a blanket that was put on the grave. All right? And then the service went on, and then it was now time to go release the soul of the dead, 1 year after. And the mediating pastor or priest, or whatever it is they call their men, had a sword in his hand, like a simi, a short sword. And then they were singing, and he went first of all and tore those mikeka, tore it, and they fell apart, and he was face to face the grave, and the blanket was removed, put aside, and then he took the knife and began to tear the grave by saying, now leave and go permanently to the other side. It's a Christian church. I was speechless. I just couldn't understand what's going on. But they read from the Bible. I think those words were Jacob is telling Esau, let this stone be the mark between me and you. You shall not cross over this side, and I will not cross over that side. And so they're saying, they put in that stone there on the grave so that the dead will not cross from the other side, coming this side, and coming, unless we call for you through our sangomas and mediators, the special men. So there's a sense there in which there is much in the African traditional religion. Now, what I want us to always do is to look at this in the context of Christianity around us and how much it is influenced by African traditional religion. Because obviously we all are not traditionalists, I hope. But the things we do sometimes are influenced by cultural traditions, and we don't know.